I truly believe that if you build something great, if you make a good product, if you build a good team that ends up making a good product, if you make an impact, you're going to end up with a lot of money almost by default. I'm not talking about charitable organizations in those kind of cases, but anything that is intended to make money is kind of going to result in that if you do something truly great. So
So Olga, welcome to the show. You are the CEO and co-founder of Emperia, a business revolutionizing the bridge between technology and fashion, a virtual realm for brands to use on the back end of their sites. So you partner with businesses such as L'Occitane, Walmart, Bloomingdale's, and over the past 5 years, you've led them to great success and also a $10 million fundraising round. Welcome to the show. Tell us a bit about that journey in your own words.
thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me. This journey, gosh, it has a lot of ups and downs, mostly ups, luckily. And I think we've gone from just an idea that maybe seemed a little bit crazy at the time when it came around. And I think I started with this idea back in 2018, 2019, when most people hearing about shopping in virtual reality or virtual reality per se were like, oh yeah, it's going to take you 15 years to get it anywhere, to a business that now works with many of the biggest retailers in the world. We have a great team that is very international. We have offices in New York and London. We have a 35 people team that is pretty widespread and I'm very, very proud of. And now a multi-product business as well, targeting areas that are much wider than just fashion and retail that it all started with. So yeah, it's been an exciting journey so far. I think we've got a long road ahead of us too. But yeah, happy to dive into any area you want to know more about.
All right, let's do it. So I think the pressing thing is something which I've seen it. I've seen the product. It's technical. It is very impressive, but you're not a technical founder. But you lead the growth and the strategy of the business. So how have you found leading a business such as Emperia over the past 5 years as a non-technical founder?
I think it's important to have a balance of skills. The way that I tend to look at my team and myself as part of my team, because while I do lead it, I'm only a piece of the puzzle. It's a balance of skill set. I often refer to people on the team as my Pokemons, because you need the skill sets that are very complementary and that balance each other well. And then sometimes in the hiring process, you're yes, this is the person that would really help this puzzle and really take it to the next level. So I think in terms of being technical and non-technical, I feel that a lot of the tech narrative is always you need to know how to code to be able to start a technology business. I think you need a co-founder, 100%, that knows how to code. And without Simon, this journey would have been absolutely impossible. But at the same time, it's not the full picture. You also need to be able to sell it. You need to be able to create a story. You need to be able to create a brand around it. And that's really where my background came into play, I would say. Definitely early days. I still do a lot of the selling. I still work a lot with our customers. And so whilst it's been humbling in many ways, and I feel I learn something new every day, and sometimes when I'm trying to explain how 3D works to a person outside of this industry, I'm wow, actually, this is something that not every person on the street necessarily knows. But also, I think it's kind of a flow of the skills that you bring, the skills that you learn, and where you go from there.
Amazing. So you're based in New York now. But you start this journey in London, here in London. Let's talk about situation and environment. So obviously, the business is a virtual environment in its own right. Let's talk about your working environment. How have you found the transition of life from London to New York? And maybe would you recommend one to a budding founder who's maybe in the early stages of their journey and maybe they're thinking of the US? It's a pretty big market. And maybe they're thinking that they need to be based there.
I think whenever a founder thinks about US, And I felt that because we started investing in the US maybe in mid 2022, sort of while we were in the process of raising Series A. And I was kind of like, yeah, people saying that founders should move if you want to make it in the US. And I think my perception was like, well, we can start making it happen in US, and then at some point, maybe post B, I will move. So I didn't think it would happen when it did happen. Word of advice, though, is you must move if you want to make it in US. I don't think it is possible to do it remotely. Kind of what we ended up with after spending 7, 8 months and having a small but still a pretty costly team in the United States, knowing how costly people can be, we weren't really performing that well. And I remember in January 2023, we were doing this trade show in New York, and I was there, and I'm like, well, why are we building this team and putting all this investment into it? And I'm still the only person really selling to the American market. And so that was kind of the point of realization that either I need to hire a GM that's going to cost us more than $500,000 a year and has a very, very high risk of failure, because it's going to be hard to transition the culture, hard to transition everything we were successful with in Europe at the time, or I move myself. And so that's really where the move came from. So in that same trip, I looked at apartments, I signed the lease, and that was basically the kind of swift move, because I made this decision in January 2023. In March, I was already living in New York.
Wow.
It kind of worked out well with like the logistics of it and things, but nonetheless, I've done an international move before. I'm originally Russian. I was there until I was 16. It's definitely harder to move to another country at 16, having no money. It's a little bit easier once you kind of know how to do life by yourself, and it's not your first rodeo with international moves. But nonetheless, it still takes a transition. I think starting to work in the US was a bit of a culture shock, because you kind of move and you think, well, people speak English, and so you understand what to do. But I think the culture of how people work, the pace, how people work is totally different. And I kind of like to look at New York as London on steroids. Things are just moving faster. And I think if I was starting another company, I would probably start in US. But at the same time, I think it really worked well for us being kind of a European new kid on the block there. And it took adaptation. But at the same time, within less than a year from my move, we signed Walmart. And US became our biggest market now, revenue-wise, in terms of revenue share. So it was definitely worth it, but it does take commitment to actually do this. So right now, all our resource and engineering and development power is based in Europe. It's led by my co-founder, and we look at commercials predominantly from US.
Amazing. So a part of that journey was a pretty significant Series A round. You raised $10 million US. That was your first raise as a founder. How did that come about? Was that something which you decided from day one that you knew that you were going to need to do from like to make the growth that you wanted to achieve? Or was that something which just naturally happened sort of as you were going through that journey?
Actually, that was our second raise. So we did a seed, pre-seed. We never really labeled it round before, which was just $800K, but we did that entirely in the UK.
And was that a private round?
It was angels and some smaller institutional investors, which honestly I have an amazing relationship with, and I feel like I'm very lucky to be supported by the guys that came into our seed. The way it came about, I think like my whole knowledge, because my background's in fashion, so I didn't really know that much about venture capital and how it all works. I think part of my journey of getting into starting a startup, I was like, well, all these people are getting investment, and so can we, right? Especially at the time when I was first exploring VR, the 2017, 2016 wave of VR investment was just coming down. So it was kind of like, oh, people invest into this. So I was like, yeah, I'm just going to go get a few $1 million. It didn't seem like something completely, out of imaginable. And so when I was going into our first raise and seed, I knew absolutely nothing about venture capital. I had zero connections, and it was kind of hard breaking into this world. I feel like it's a very elitist type of environment where you need introductions for people to even talk to you, to acknowledge whatever you're doing. So we started in late 2019, 2020 through to mid 2021. We were entirely bootstrapped. So we're revenue generating from day one. And so we were running on those revenues. And I was pretty much thinking, how do I make payroll every single month? And if I couldn't make payroll, I was like, okay, let's send some more emails and try and close some more deals. And then from there, once we raised seed, from seed to Series A, we closed our seed round in late 2021, and we started our Series A raise in mid 2022. So it really wasn't that long a time between the jump, but the business was growing very fast. We were growing about 50% quarter on quarter. And so it just kind of made sense for us to do. I think the biggest thing for me was Series A was bigger money, was going into that venture path. I just wanted to grow. Like I was like, I want to IPO. It's the only thing that matters. It's important for me to build something really, really big, make a lot of impact. And so it just was a most sensible way to go about it, felt like.
Wicked. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your ambitions. IPO?
I mean, I feel like I was young and very hungry. I'm still very hungry. I'm not very old. But I think as you go through this journey, you start seeing different paths and considering different paths as to what makes more sense for yourself, for your team, for the business, for the investors around the table. And I think the way I think about it is like what makes the most sense for the business. Because really at that point, like I truly believe that if you build something great, if you make a good product, if you build a good team that ends up making a good product, if you make an impact, you're going to end up with a lot of money almost by default. I'm not talking about charitable organizations in those kind of cases, but anything that is intended to make money is kind of going to result in that if you do something truly great. So that's, I'd say, my fundamental core belief. And there's many ways to go about like what is going to make the biggest impact. And sometimes it might be M&A. Sometimes it might be more fundraising and going down the IPO path. So I feel like now I'm a bit more open to possibilities than maybe I was when I started.
Awesome. We spoke previously about your team. Now, a big factor of your growth and success is in your team. You mentioned it earlier with one of your co-founders. You're across like 13 different countries, I believe.
Yeah.
I would love to say that's insane. It is insane. However, with the remote possibilities that we've had over the past few years, it's become more commonplace. But even so, you're based in New York. Your co-founders are based in Europe. You've got 13 different nationalities, 13 different cultures. One, I guess, what's your approach to hiring? And two, how do you maintain a culture that's across so many different regions?
I think when it comes to hiring, so we run the exact same hiring process regardless of the role, whether it is a junior marketing manager or an exec at VP or C-level. And I think that consistency really helps us to see the right journey and find a talent that is a good fit for the business. And nobody ever will have 100% success rate. I think if you can get to a 90% success rate, you're already very, very lucky. All of my executive team have joined very, very early in this journey, somewhere between 2020 and 2021. And a few of them have also grown in the companies. They started in junior, mid-level roles and then got to a VP, senior director kind of levels, which is also really exciting to see people grow and support them through that journey and grow with the business, essentially. But I think when it comes to maintaining cultural integrity, as much as people say, oh, you need to like make sure that your whole team knows the values, I think they do, but every offsite that we do, they're like, oh, what were the values? But at the same time, they live by them day in, day out, because it's about personality traits rather than something that you tell them to be. Like, say something that's really, really important for me value-wise is accountability and making sure that you can raise your hand and say, yeah, hey, I messed up here. And this is how we're going to fix it, and let's find a solution together. The other thing is being direct, and that's something that is sometimes hard to maintain across different cultures because some cultures are indirect by nature. And it maybe takes people a few months to adjust once they join to like, hey, we can come in and actually say that this sucks. and that's fine. And you're not going to get fired for that or reprimanded or anything like that. Actually, it's great to say something sucks because that means that we can make it better. And so this is something that's really, really fundamental in every person that we bring on board. So do they believe in how we believe is the right way to work and the way to work for us? And that allows us to move really, really fast because of that. I think because we were remote from day one, really, because we started hiring, like I made my first hire, it was April 2020. There was no other option other than to go remote. And even though we started hiring in London, then people started moving around. And so we ended up being an international team kind of by default because people went home, people wanted to leave London in COVID. It just didn't really make sense for them to do this. And so I haven't actually met my team in person until about a year and a half later in October 2021. And that's always such a rewarding experience to have a very diverse team because that means that we have so many different perspectives. And I think one thing that is sometimes problematic in tech in general is very homogenized teams that bring very single-sided perspectives. And I think having this cultural diversity of all types is super, super important to coming up with the best ideas. And I think the best ideas can come from anywhere. We had the most like people that are fresh out of college coming out with the coolest thing ever and designing the coolest parts of the product, sometimes that have been super, super successful. So I feel it's really about a combination of skills and mindsets.
Love that. This episode is sponsored by Opus. Opus brings entrepreneurs together to create opportunity through power of connection. Opus is a curated community for business builders who understand that relationships are the backbone of business and success. If you are an entrepreneur, founder, business builder, laser focused on a mission, Opus could be for you too. To find out more, go to joinopus.org. Now back to the show. Awesome. So you mentioned there, if people can come to you or the team, the management team, with any issues or errors or anything that they could see improvement, you have an accountability sort of process in place, right? Let's talk about you. What are the biggest sort of challenges that you faced over the past few years? Maybe some things that you've seen go wrong or that you may improve on if you did it all again.
Gosh, I think there's been so many things. To be honest, I feel it's a journey that you go in thinking, oh, I can just make it all smooth and all successful. And I think you learn way more from your mistakes and from the hard times than you do from the good times, very, very frequently. And I feel every founder in like any accelerator or early journey gets told like, oh, read the hard thing about the hard things. And when you start, it makes absolutely no sense. You're like, oh, it's just saying how hard stuff is. Mine is not going to be like this. I think you just go in with this unbeatable optimism, which you really, really need. I think it's super important to have this and to just have this belief that you're going to persevere no matter what. Some of the bigger, I guess, more challenging things, probably. So the Series A fundraising process was pretty hard because we've just gone out of the 2021, early 2022 hype when all you saw was nonstop, like, oh, they just raised a seed round at $100 million valuation without even having a product. So I think going into that process, I was very much, oh, the business is growing fast, and things are going well. And some of my advisors at the time were like, just wait a little bit, close a couple more deals, which we did close, and you'll get a better valuation. And it's the right thing to do to wait. And then we started the raise in May 2022. And in June 2022, the market crashed completely. I think things came to a complete halt where people just weren't investing regardless of what the state of the business was. And so it was a pretty excruciating process, which I think I kind of underestimated how much time and effort it's going to take. And so I got gradually beaten by that process and then had to kind of have a call of, okay, well, now I'm going to pull myself together and try and go at it again multiple times. I think we spoke to like maybe 50 to 100 investors, and these, which I know most founders do, but especially at that time, when you go from the expectation of, oh, I'm going to close this round in like 6 weeks tops. And I think that's what a lot of people are like, yeah, I've just went out and I had this pipeline and it just worked. And that really wasn't the case for me. And this endless dance, which I have some friends in venture as well that I know both parties actually hate. Like the founders hate the dance, the VCs hate the dance, but you still have to do it because there's no other way to do this. So that was definitely one of the probably lowest points of battling the process and well emerging on the other side. But at the same time, it did come to places where I was like, well, how are we going to do it?
And what did that low point kind of look like? Was it burnout? I mean, I imagine you're spending multiple days a week trying to focus on the investment whilst combining that with managing a team, managing that with trying to close some more deals. Like you were leading the sales charge as well. So you've got a lot on your plate. I imagine it was super intense.
It was very intense. I think we kind of walked to the wire a few times, and that's where I feel that I wasn't. I think that the reason I was so invested in that process, and I felt that I wasn't necessarily there on the day to day with my team, and that's where I think you can move a lot faster when the founder is there and not distracted by the fundraising process, for sure. I think emotionally, the other thing is you start associating yourself with your company so much that you don't really see anything beyond it, in a sense. So it was kind of like, I will succeed no matter what, because if I don't, it feels like it's life or death. Even though in reality it's just a game. And I think the right approach to it, and like the approach that I probably take most often now, is, well, it's not. You're not going to die if things don't work out the way you want. But at that point, I was like, well, things are going to work out. There's just no other way. And then you keep going at it, you keep beating it, you keep trying to beat the process. And so I think it was pretty emotionally excruciating, I would say, at the time to go at it.
Yeah, I've not gone through a fundraise myself, but I've not met anyone in the ecosystem that comes away from it going, oh yeah, it was just like signing on a sort of piece of paper. It's definitely not a easy process. And, you know, I think when people say, I think I'll have it wrapped up in three or 4 months, that normally turns into more like 6, 7 or 8 months. But yeah, I can imagine it was very challenging. So alongside the investment process, you're doing the sales. So as a founder who's leading that sales charge, when you were in your maybe the first year or 2 years, you had no sales experience, like zero, right? You know, you came from a fashion background, you've done some consulting, which I appreciate. You have to kind of sell yourself a little bit on that front, but this level of sales, talking to some of the biggest brands globally, how did you find that process going into the rooms with the big dogs?
I think what I had the experience and understanding of, because I've done retail sales, I've done wholesale sales, which, given it's not really on the same scale and it's not really putting yourself and everything you believe in on the line necessarily, but still it gives you some perspective. And I think I had a very good understanding of the market, because that's where really my whole background is, in the fashion market and working with brands. And so I kind of understood the perspective of how they think. At the same time, none of my experience before, I guess, put me into this process of how do you sell technology? What's the sales cycle? What's the deal flow? How do you get in front of them? How do you actually sign that contract? What's the procurement process looks like? So there's many things that I had to learn, that my team also had to learn. I think sales process is something that you adapt nonstop. Like, I feel we adapt pricing, change pricing every few months. We play with things, we change things a lot. And I think you have to do that, because once you feel that you have figured something out, the market changes. And I think that's something we all definitely have seen in 2023, where like, well, things that worked before don't necessarily work anymore. And so you have to adapt and you have to shift and pivot. And I think it's just being okay with that change is really important. In terms of working with those really big brands, it was just so exciting. Like, I remember the first time, so our first big retail customer was Harrods. And they reached out to us, and I believe it was a Google ad that led them to us. We were always...
What was that key term?
Oh gosh, I don't actually remember. I'm gonna need to ask my CMO. But I think like because we were always predominantly inbound driven, so I would say 95 to 99% it was inbound driven, and it still is the same. We now launched
and that's through like Google Ads, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, yeah, LinkedIn's always been a very big channel. Some PR efforts as well. We do like a mix of in-house and an agency managing things as well. But inbound, and I think I got very lucky with my CMO, and we actually invested in marketing before we invested in sales. And I think that was the right move for this kind of business because we are essentially a technology in a bit of a blue ocean kind of space. So we had to explain to people what it is because in 2020, if you told people it's a virtual store, they were like, what?
Well, I mean, even today, I imagine you're still having to do the education piece, right?
A little bit. It's still easier to show things sometimes, but now I can just pull up my phone and be like, okay, this is what we do. Because it still gets question marks sometimes, but definitely a lot less so than it was back in the day. And so remember when Harrods reached out, I was calling my parents and I was like, can you believe it? Like Harrods just reached out to us. And it kind of started spinning from there because they ended up reselling our technology to Burberry, then to Dom Perignon and Dior. And once you have those names that you worked with and kind of in your portfolio of customers, it's a lot easier to work with others.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's good to have the logos. Tell me now then, how did Harrods and Burberry and Dior use the business? How do they use it?
So the very core of it and what we are today is we call it immersive commerce platform. So we essentially provide the underlying technology to create a virtual experience that integrates into e-commerce with the purpose of driving engagement, acquiring younger audiences, driving ROI conversion rates as well, specifically for those target younger audiences. One of the bigger challenges, I think, for retail today is how do they stay relevant for Gen Z? I feel like we're just on the cusp of starting to be important for Gen Alpha as well. And so how do we carry through the e-commerce into the next generation, considering that we're now getting the head-mounted devices and VR devices that are a lot better and a lot more popular with the general public. So I think this is where we really fit into the tech stack for retailers, where essentially we help them create a virtual environment that reflects their brand, that will then live on their website and bring this gamification engagement element to still allow people to shop in 3D. And what this actually looks like can be vastly different from brand to brand. Like Lacoste has their virtual store inside a crocodile. So you actually get into a crocodile through the mouth. You get to shop all the products. You collect the crocodiles within it to win a special discount code, those types of things. We work with Chanel. Their store is set on the moon. So it really vastly depends on the brand, and visually what we always focused on is the quality of the 3D graphics so they can create any type of visual that is important for them.
Yeah, amazing. So then if we go the other side of it, so that's sort of B2B to C to the consumer. Let's talk about revenue models, because you mentioned it earlier in one of your answers. You pivoted your revenue model. So, a typical SaaS product would be on a membership or subscription basis, like let's say it's monthly fee, but you pivoted away from that over the past years. Run me through how that sort of logic came across you, I suppose, and then how you implemented it.
Yeah, so we were a very typical SaaS. I think we started with a monthly basis. We then quickly shifted away from it because working especially with large enterprise, they kind of want the certainty of a contract and you want that certainty too. So we stopped even introducing and offering a monthly price. It kind of went straight into a 1-year minimum enterprise contract, but it was still a flat kind of fixed subscription fee that depending on the scale of features, how big's their experience, those types of things. In the beginning of this year, we have shifted into more of a usage-based model. And the reason we did that is we have launched a new product which is targeting 3D artists, development studios, creative studios. And that felt like a really natural progression for the business because over those 5 years, we have built a lot of tech in the background that enabled us to deliver to brands. And we're like, wait, actually, since all our artists really love it, is there a place where it's bringing value for someone else. And we had a lot of inquiries from agency studios specifically that were like, oh, can we partner with you somehow? Can we build on Emperia? And so we're like, well, let's wrap this into a product so it doesn't look like something built in 1998 anymore, because I think when you build something internally, it always looks a little scrappy. So we have put a lot of effort into actually bringing in productizing what we've built for ourselves and making it into a product. And so that's created and started a PLG model, which we've always been a enterprise sales driven organization. We now have another arm to the business, which is predominantly PLG driven, and that comes with its own challenges and adaptations. But what I was kind of looking at is, how do we consolidate it? Because we're still not a very big business. Like, we're not 1,000 people company to be able to really differentiate it and position it as like, these are totally different products, these are totally different things. And also budget-wise, if you're targeting completely different audiences with completely different messages, it becomes very, very messy very fast. So in terms of business model, what was important there is, how do we consolidate it so it makes sense for both the PLG side of market and the enterprise side of market? And that's where we have transitioned to usage-based model, where we still have some base subscription level that is at least a minimum, but the very core of it comes from the use of data and how much data they consume. And so we charge for the bandwidth. Now, I feel like it also gave us a competitive edge compared to other players in the market, specifically within virtual experience realm, not even just virtual store and immersive commerce realm. So the bigger part of it is like TLDR, but the way most people would charge for 3D experiences is pixel streaming. Pixel streaming is super expensive. It's about $1 an hour a user. When if you take it to the scale of Walmart, to serve Walmart kind of customer base, you need a lot of investment, which is just not reasonable for what the experience can create. And so we have kind of reversed that model. Like, well, let's not charge per user, let's not charge on hour, but we'll just charge a bandwidth fee that kind of really made sense to make it more optimal. So we end up keeping it at like at 8 to 10 cents per user lifetime. So it just created a lot of edges and barriers, I feel, for us compared to other players, and made the whole operation smoother because the entire business maintains the same business model rather than different pockets in different areas.
Completely makes sense. So let's talk about innovation. So innovation in a new space, or a space that needs innovation on, is kind of a arms race to find product market fit, or what most people call product market fit. Is something which most founders aspire to have, or it's something they focus solely focus on, monofocus. Talk me through your thoughts on product market fit.
I feel like my thoughts on product market fit are very controversial, to be honest. I feel it's a bit of an elusive concept that people kind of chase, and once you have product market fit, you just pour a lot of money into it and it just works. And I think in perfect economic conditions, it can be true, but it does require perfect economic conditions. And those perfect economic conditions, I think we were very lucky in like 2010s, and there was a long run of pretty good economic conditions. We are now definitely not in that state. We haven't been in that state for a few years. And when we will come out of that state, hopefully we're in the last leg of it, but let's see where the world goes. And so I think what is important is not to forget that, okay, you think that you found the product market fit. You built the product, somebody wants to buy it, you can make money from this. But at the same time, things can change very, very fast. And if you don't keep your finger on the pulse, and if you don't think, well, actually, I still need to be extremely aware of what's happening in the industry from all perspectives, like what are the other technologies, what is generally happening in the market? Are people going to spend money right now, or are they not? And, like when you're in great conditions, people are willing to invest to make more money. In a downturn, it's more about how can we save money, cheaper things that save money work better. And so I think from that perspective, if you think that you have product market fit and that's all you need, it's very easy to miss that point. And then once you miss that point, you continue pouring money into something that cannot work because the market environment is not there, and all the other components that need to be there are not there anymore. And that's where I think it's very easy to run to a halt. because you think that you're there when the conditions have changed. So that's why I think like product market fit is something that, it's kind of, it's a tick box, but it can stop being fitting at any given point.
Yeah, super fluid, like across your
Exactly.
journey. Do some quick fire questions then. So you have a really good support network from what you've been telling me with your co-founders, advisors. It's a common topic. I think it's a topic that's really relevant right now. If you're a first-time founder, like you were once, how do you find good advisors? How do you find those people to surround yourself by? And I guess, how did you find them?
So I think there's probably two sides to it. There is a team that you need to be able to trust. And for me, building good relationship, especially with my executive team, has been always very, very important, because in the end, these are the people that are going to go through so many challenges with you that if you don't like each other, it becomes very, very hard. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it, with advisors especially, I think, so I've been very lucky with my early stage investors. So one of the angels that came on board and effectively co-led the round, Jay Radia, he was really, really great in supporting and mentoring me through early days. And he's a 3 times founder himself. And I think trying to find someone that's been through this journey is super important. The other thing, like most of those connections, I've initially built through accelerators that we would get on. I never really gave equity to accelerators because I think most of them want too much, but we participated in Plug and Play. We did a digital catapult accelerator here in the UK. They were pretty useful in building those connections. I think one thing with any advice, I think what I learned is take it with a bit of a pinch of salt, because it's important to hear and to listen what is out there, what other people have done, what has worked. But at the same time, you always need to filter it yourself into, is it going to work for your business? And does it feel right? I think I'm I learned to listen to my intuition over the years. And if something really doesn't feel right, don't do that. I think some of the mistakes that I made over time has very much come from, okay, this is the playbook. I follow the playbook. This is how you need to do it. And I think, especially after we raised A, I got a little bit lost in, oh, well, I haven't done this before. What do I do now? And all these people are so much more experienced than me, and they definitely know what to do. But the reality is nobody knows what to do. And so you just have to listen to yourself and figure out your own way. And yes, take pieces of all that advice, but assemble your own path from it. And I think none of the great companies that are there today, if you look at their path, all of that is nonlinear. All of that is somewhat different. None of it follows a specific playbook that is just, oh, you just take that and it just 100% works. It doesn't.
Yeah, there's no right way.
Exactly.
There's no right way. There's your own way, which is typically the right way. How about co-founders? I would say there's a high percentage of ambitious people out there that don't go on the journey of entrepreneurship or becoming a founder because they desire a co-founder. How did you find your co-founders? What's your opinion? Could you have done this yourself without them? Most people say no when they have co-founders, but how did you find yours, and how do you view the value of them?
Yeah, I think I got really, really lucky. Could I have done that without Simon? I don't think so. And so it was a bit non-standard, I think, of a way to find co-founder, because I had this idea for Emperia once I left Microsoft. And I was like, okay, how do I do this? Because I have zero technical skills. All I knew about 3D at the time is that there are polygons and you can use Unity or Unreal Engine to build VR. And I wanted to do it in Unreal Engine because it looked better. Like, that's all I knew. And I was like, well, for me to sell to especially high-end fashion market, which was our very first market, it has to look amazing. So that was kind of all I could judge at that point. And my very first demo came from one of my master's classmates, gave me this contact of a development firm in India. And so they helped me build a demo for a very terrible headset, to be honest, called Vive Focus. I'm kind of glad that's off the market now, but it was the first untethered headset back in 2019. And so I had that demo, and through a family connection, I got a contract with a real estate firm for one of those virtual walkthroughs for off-plan selling. And the contract was pretty big. It was £80,000. And I was just by myself at that point. I don't even know how I sold it. It was like somehow I managed to convince them that I can fulfill that. Maybe it was cheap for what they wanted, because now I would have put like 5 to 10 people on that project for 3 months. And at that point, I was like, well, I'm going to post a job ad on LinkedIn and see what's going to happen from it. So that's how I met Simon, from the job ad. And he came up, and he was transitioning from the time that he spent in gaming and developing games and working with Unreal Engine. And the only way I could assess what he's doing is, I was like, well, can you essentially rebuild what that Indian development firm has done with me? And I spent 3 months working with them back and forth to try and get to that demo. And I was like, can you copy this in a week, or come up with a part of it in a week? And I can basically look at how well you've done. And so he comes back pretty much 24 hours later and goes, there you go. And it looks about 100 times better.
No way.
Yes, it
And
was.
no payment, nothing. He just.
It was a test task, essentially. It was
No way.
a test task. Like I had no other way to assess him. And so, and that's how he came on board initially as an engineer to work on that specific project with me. And I mean, the project was massive. Like, I think it needed really 5 people plus to deliver it. And I was like, hey, look, I can look at it visually and I can help you with design direction, but I am literally zero help with making it work. Like, there's absolutely nothing I can help you with. And so we were on it for almost 4 months. The client was pretty terrible, even by today's standards. There was a lot of changes, a lot of requests. I didn't really know how to manage it effectively at the time as well. So things were very messy, but we were on it 24/7, many sleepless nights. He was in Lithuania at the time for summer as well, so we're doing things remotely. I remember he went to Spain for a few weeks, and I think he didn't see the beach while he was being there, because he was like, we were both so committed, and I just thought, wow, we worked so well together. Like, we had very similar work ethics, very similar approach to how to run things, how to battle things. So I was like, hey, do you want to be a co-founder after that? And I think the only thing he asked me, he was like, what do you want to do with this thing? I was like, well, I want to IPO it, of course. He was like, okay. And he signed a co-founder agreement in that. So I think it's so important to have the right co-founder, both in terms of complementary skill sets, but also in terms of work ethics, because in the end, you both put pretty much your entire life into it for a few years. And the way that different parts of the company works really depends on equally on both of the co-founders. So, and I know that co-founder conflict can be very, very detrimental, but we've never been in a place where I don't think we ever had like severe co-founder conflicts, honestly, because we were just had a lot of respect for each other, and also a view of, okay, I trust you completely with your part. And I think that's really, really important.
Absolutely. I think also though, right, the challenge you have, or any founder has, and this is where the risk-taking nature inside you sometimes has to come out to the surface, which is, you knew Simon for a matter of months. You didn't know he existed before that, and you're signing on a co-founder agreement. You've seen him go to work, and you can see that he's talented. He can see that you're ambitious and you have your own set of skills, and those ambitions and work ethics and the sort of early values that you get to see from one another have come out, and you've just gone, yep, let's go in this together. You know, that's crazy. On the surface, that is just straight up crazy. But that's sometimes what it takes to be successful. You know, was that something which has always been a part of you, that risk sort of taking nature, or is it something which just came through Emperia and that brought it out in you?
I think I was never too afraid of risk and failure. I think, if anything, like, I moved to another country at 16, and that did seem risky, but at the same time, I was like, that's what I really want to do, and I really want to be in London, I really want to be in this place. So did the risk-taking nature come out more in the founder journey? 100%. But I wouldn't say this was ever something that really scared me, because I think the way I look at things is I tend to not really visualize the worst case scenario, but at the same time, you kind of have to look at it as a game, because if you feel like you're placing your entire livelihood on this, it becomes very, very scary. But when you see it as, well, you make this move, it can lead you into any of these paths, and let's see where it gets us. I think for me, it was always, here's my North Star, and I kind of tend to have a 5 to 10 year plan in my head at pretty much any given point. And once the first 5 year plan like comes to an end, the next one kind of naturally appears as a part of a progression. And I think from there, it's a lot more fun when you are taking those big risks to make big things. And I think that's where essentially big reward comes with big risk, right? Like there's no such thing as you just live very peacefully, you don't take any risk at all, you go very progressively, and then all of a sudden you change the world. Like that doesn't happen. And I think when things get tough, I tend to also think, well, if it was easy, if it was very easy, everyone would be a billionaire, and then you'd need to be a trillionaire to actually, be successful. So I think it's the mentality of how you approach risk. But I've always been I don't think I've ever been risk averse in my life.
Completely makes sense. So you mentioned your 5 and 10 year plan. How long are we along the journey of that 5 year block that you've aligned for yourself?
I think we are somewhere in like the last part of the first 5 year block.
Okay, so what's in the second part? What's in the second part of that? So then if you've gone from 0 to 5, and I'm going to make a jump, an assumption that you've done pretty well in that period of time, despite your ambition. Let's go from 5 to 10 years then. So then in the next 5 years for Olga, what is for you? What do you want to achieve? And maybe don't just focus on the business, although I know that's a large part of your life, like it is for me as well, with the business that I run. Think about it from a personal level. Like, what is the next five years look for you?
I mean, I think the next 5 years I still see very much dedicated to the business, which takes up probably 70% of my life, maybe 70 to 80. As boring as it sounds, but it's still...
I think anyone in that journey completely understands that statement.
Yeah, I feel like, the first 3 years of Emperia, I worked like maybe 16 hours a day, every day. It's a little bit more balanced now, but it's still pretty high up there. And I think the importance of work has always been very important for me. As I think about the journey of the business, that's very much about how do we bring not just retail, but the future of virtual experience in general, and essentially in that the future of the internet as we're moving into other devices and Apple Vision Pro and Meta Quest and all those types of things. How can we make all of that being built and powered by Emperia and really drive those experiences, and essentially anything that is non-gaming, because that's the one sector of 3D that we don't touch that much. But everything else, every commercially created experience, how can we drive that by our platform? So that's something that I would see as a future for Emperia. For myself, I think beyond the company, something that I am very, very passionate about is education. And I feel that I'm very lucky to have the education that I have. But at the same time, there's many places in the world that don't have this opportunity and this privilege. And also, I think, and maybe controversial opinion, but I feel that even in the UK and in the United States, the way that school education is performing today, it hasn't changed in quite a few years. And it's not really adapt for where the world is heading with AI, with all kind of information being at your fingertips. We're still teaching kids how to memorize pure facts and not how to use information and process information and make decisions. And so if that's something that can impact in some way, I'd be very excited about that.
I love that. And it is relatively controversial because in the sense of there's a lot of people in the education system, but I don't think anyone can disagree going through high school education or university education in this country in the past sort of 5 to 10 years. We're still teaching textbooks from the 1950s, 1960s around psychology and things like that, which is, I'm not saying it's necessarily outdated, but there are just a number of other ways to learn those sort of materials and knowledge base. So as a founder, one question I love to ask everyone that comes on this podcast: talent or luck, which do you think has been more prevalent for you as a founder in the past 5 years?
As in my own talent?
Yeah, I suppose which one is more important for you? Is it the talent to be a successful founder, or is it the luck?
Um, I honestly think it's probably 60% luck, 40% skill. I think it tends to balance itself out every now and then, but I do think you need to be lucky in so many ways. Like, you need to be lucky to come across the right people. Yes, you need to have some sense of skill to bring them on board and to even go in a certain direction. But at the same time, you need to be lucky with the people, you need to be lucky with the environment, you need to be lucky with what the market wants at the time when you're trying to do it. Because I think if I started Imperia like 5 years before in 2015, I don't think it would have gone anywhere because just the world wasn't really ready. And so I think it's really a combination, but I really consider myself lucky with with where we got. And so I think, to be honest, I'd probably lean more towards luck.
Love it. Thank you so much. Olga, you've been my everyday founder. Thank you so much.